Hey team, hope you're all doing well. Today's topic I want to go over, should I run positive or negative splits? And I get a lot of questions on if running a negative split is the real way to go if I'm wanting to set a new personal best over my chosen distance. In most cases, most athletes run positive splits. Now, there's a lot of athletes that have set world records setting a negative split. And the difference between the two, if you don't know, a negative split is running the second half of your race faster than you run the first half. And a positive split is running slower the second half of your race, going out much faster in the first half. Example of that, when I ran 2:19.35 for the marathon, I went out 1:07.09 for the first half and came back with a 1:12.26. So every athlete's different. I think being a little bit more conservative in the early stages of your race is always the smartest way to go. That being said, if you've done your homework and training and you're in great anaerobic shape, you've put in the heavy work, you've done the speed workouts, you've tapered correctly, and you're, most importantly, confident both physically as well as mentally, you can go out much faster in the first half of your race and have that extra time, that extra buffer time to slow down somewhat in the second half and still set a new personal best. But I think the differences between that positive split and a negative split, in most cases, most athletes run positive splits and set new personal bests. Sometimes they'll run positive splits and really just run very poorly in the second half of their race. And then there's other times where athletes will run a negative split and still not set a personal best, as well as set a personal best. So I think every athlete is different. I think being very smart in the early stages of your race is always a better bet. You don't redline, and you're not forced to slow down so dramatically in the latter stages of your race, and you're able to sustain pace longer as long as you've done everything in training properly. You have really paid attention to hydration in your race. I think that's another big mistake that a lot of athletes that are either trying to run a positive split in their races or a negative split, if you're not paying attention to your nutrition, you're not taking in enough calories, you're not taking in enough fluid, especially in these longer races like the 10K, 10 mile, half marathon, marathon, and ultra marathons especially. If you're neglecting that, you really can do everything right in training. You can work on your speed development. You can taper down correctly, but if you go out far too aggressive and go into oxygen debt too early, or if you don't pay attention to taking in enough calories and enough fluid in your race, really you could be really shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to trying to get a new personal best in your race. So I think running a positive split in most cases does work for a lot of athletes, but also running a negative split in most cases, if you've done it, if you are much more conservative in the early stages of your race and you don't go out too slow that you lose touch with your competition, and then you spend the entire rest of your race trying to catch up to them, you do have to be aware of those things in trying to run a negative split. You don't want to go out so aerobically and so easily in that first half that the runners that really are in great anaerobic shape, and you might be in great anaerobic shape as well, but if those athletes gain too much ground on you, then running a negative split can be a detriment. You do want to get out aggressive. I always say this to athletes that are either training for track and field races, road races, or long races like these 10 mile, half marathon, marathon races. You can sprint practically all out for the first 200 meters of your race and not lose any and not build up any significant lactic acid. So you do want to get out very aggressive, but then slow down and settle into your pace. But don't run so aggressive that you're running someone else's race and it forces you to go into oxygen debt and dramatically slow down. So I think between the two, should I positive split or a negative split my races? I think it really depends on the maturity level of the athlete, the overall fitness of the athlete. If you're unsure about your overall fitness, I think it's always best to run more conservative in the early stages of your race and then start picking up the pace, as you get further on. Especially in the marathon, that first part of the race is the first 20 miles, and the second part is the last 6.2 miles. But if it's a shorter race, like a 5K, I always tell my athletes, don't try to make a move in a 5K until you get to the first mile, okay? Get through that first mile, be aggressive, get out, but don't try to win a 5K in the first mile or the first 1.6 kilometers of that race. Once you get past the first mile, then attack. Make it a 2.1 mile race. Continue to work on your speed development and training. Continue to work on your long runs. Always challenge yourself in training. Make training the most difficult part of your preparation so that when you get to the race and you start to taper down, you really can run an effective race and go out there and set a new personal best, as long as you've really paid attention to not just running easy, relaxed, slow mileage throughout the week and being consistent with your mileage. That is important. But if you're running too much of that volume too aerobically, it's going to be very hard to match up against anybody that's spending a higher percentage of their weekly volume at or below their AT pace, their tempo pace, anaerobic threshold pace. These athletes, like the Kenyans, other Americans, athletes around the world that are Europeans, Canadians, Japanese, Chinese, there's so many athletes around the world that are running these great times. They're prepared well, but they also, sometimes they run personal best on positive splits, and sometimes they'll run personal best on negative splits. And again, I think you still can go out, if you're confident in what you're doing, you still can go out much faster in the first half, slow down in the second half, and still set a new personal best. You know, as I mentioned, when I ran my marathon best, I went out the first half marathon 3 seconds slower than my personal best for the half marathon. Okay, my PR is 107.06 for the half. I went out 107.09 through the first half of my marathon. Okay, and I came back with a 112.26. So I was confident. I knew I was fit. I had run a 50-54 10 mile and a 107.06 half marathon just a few months prior to running that time. And I was still at 144.05 through the 20 mile mark, around 5:11 mile pace through 20 miles. I knew I was confident, but I also knew in that last 10 kilometers that I was slowing dramatically. I was running probably like high 520s, 540s range in that last 10 kilometers to average out at 5:19 mile pace for the 26.2 miles. I don't know if I would have went out 112.26 if I would have run a 2:19.35 for the marathon and come back with a 107.09. Okay, so sometimes you do have to have that confidence to go out and attempt a positive split. Go out faster in the first half, and yes, you may slow down a little bit in that second half, but it doesn't mean you won't be able to set a new personal best or still be able to really run a great time. But I think in a lot of cases, for a lot of athletes, we've been taught, be a little conservative in the early stages of your race, run a negative split, and then really have that glycogen storage and that energy to really pour it on in the last few miles, last few kilometers of your race, and run a negative split and set a new personal best. There are a lot of world records that have been set by athletes on the track and on the roads that run a negative split. And there are some cases where world records have been set with positive splits. So I hope this makes sense. Should I positive or negative split in a race? I think it really depends on your fitness level and your confidence level. Try running a positive split. Experiment a little bit. Try running a positive split and then try running a negative split and see how you perform in those types of races. So I hope this video is helpful for all of you that are either training for track and field races or road races or trail races or marathons and half marathons. Feel free to leave me a comment below. I will definitely reach back out to you. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so when I make a new video, you'll be notified of it. And definitely check below all of my videos. I definitely have resources there that'll help you, as well as on RunDreamAchieve.com. I've been there since 2011, writing content, creating products and services for athletes of all ability levels. So I wish you all the best, and I will talk to you all in the next video.